So as I said, this is the second webinar in a series of 4. And for today's topic, we are going to be hearing from a nonprofit leader, Gabe Shapiro, from All In Energy, and Keely Moore from Studio G Architects to talk about how each of their organizations work with residents to make retrofits happen, and dealing specifically with different aspects of involving tenants, responding to tenants, and working with them in productive ways to link access to these clean energy retrofit benefits with renters, low to moderate income folks, and non-English speaking residents as well. So just a little bit about MCAN. We've been around since 2000. We have a network of volunteer chapters around the state, and we believe that local change focused on clean energy, energy retrofits, and public utilities, net zero stretch codes, all of this can inform a state level change. So we really focus on both levels, but our theory of change is rooted in local action. And we have the tools to do this. We are in the process of developing social media toolkits, specifically targeting the net zero stretch code and net zero housing construction. So be on the lookout for that. And learning more and more how to use technology to connect a broader base of advocates and experts for creating a just transition for the Commonwealth. And I will pass the microphone to Jenny to talk a little bit about Boston Society for Architecture.
Thank you, Sarah. And it's nice to see you all here this afternoon, I guess, at this point. For those of you I'm Jenny Efron, the Policy Director at the Boston Society for Architecture. And for anyone who is not familiar with the BSA, we are both a local chapter of the AIA, the second largest actually in the whole country. And we are also a public-facing nonprofit, which through our BSA Foundation. Next slide. We are, among many of the programs and initiatives that we are committed to, climate is at the top of our list. We support climate advocacy work through legislation and through initiatives. One of our current initiatives is collecting case studies of net zero energy retrofits. That is something we've been working on since this past summer, and I think we'll soon get a boost in an effort to continue to advocate for both the possibility of these retrofits and the current existence of these retrofits as a very viable option. So stay tuned for that. Next slide, please. And another one of our focuses is around housing. And our housing work right now is being led by my colleague, Wandy Pasquale, who is a Housing Innovation Design Fellow working for both the BSA and the City of Boston's iLab. We are exploring the possibility of affordable middle-scale housing similar to triple deckers, and currently have a virtual exhibition online exploring the past, present, and future of middle-scale housing as both an affordable and sustainable opportunity, and have been proud partners with Mass CEC to showcase their recent triple-decker design challenge, which I hope some of you will be able to check out, which explores deep energy retrofits for this iconic form of housing. So with that, I will pass that back to Sarah now.
Thank you, Jenny. That's great. So we have 2 really interesting speakers today. We are really pleased to have Gabe Shapiro, the co-founder and co-executive director of a nonprofit, of an organization called All In Energy. And Gabe is going to talk about some of the barriers to connecting renters, non-English speakers, low to moderate income households to the programs and services related to retrofits. And following Gabe is Keely Moore, a fantastic architect with Studio G Architects, talking about 3 different projects, 2 of which involved working with housing authorities. And she's going to present this idea of reciprocal learning to us as one way for organizations to enter into working with residents in productive and worthwhile ways. Each speaker will have about 15 to 20 minutes for sharing their insights. And following Keely's presentation, we'll have ample time for question and answers. And then we will close our session by outlining 4 possibilities for folks on this call to get involved in advocacy efforts that focus specifically on net zero housing, net zero stretch codes, and the affordability of retrofits. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Jenny, if we could make Gabe a co-host, and Gabe can start his presentation, and just, yes, that would be great. And as Jenny has indicated in the chat, if you could please put your questions in the chat, and I will extract them as we go, and we can collect them for our Q&A session.
All right, thank you, Sarah and Jenny. Is this working? The screen, can just someone say yes? You can see the screen?
Yes.
All right,
yes.
Great. Excellent. So thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon with all of you, and I'm excited to share our story. I am Gabe Shapiro, the co-founder and co-executive director of All in Energy. We are a 501c3 nonprofit with the mission to accelerate a transition to an inclusive clean energy economy. And that, as I'll describe in a minute, means removing some barriers for populations who have historically had low participation rates of no fault of their own in Massachusetts clean energy programs. And one of those populations are folks that live in rental units. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So All in Energy, our work we really see as at the nexus of 2 challenges around energy equity. On the one hand, as we all know, Massachusetts, #1, 9 years in a row, ACAA rated state in energy programming. But when you look at the data about who's benefiting from these programs, really our public benefits are going disproportionately to suburban communities where homes and incomes are larger and the populations are just generally wealthier and whiter, while folks that live in our city centers, where there are more buildings that have rental units, more multi-unit buildings, where incomes are generally lower, and there are more families that speak languages other than English, are not benefiting as much, even though they're paying into the program like we all are. So that's one gap that we're trying to close. And at the same time, all of our public investment is leading to these, a really, especially pre-COVID, booming clean energy economy. We've got lots of companies that are making the programs work and are growing. But when you walk into the headquarters of these organizations, there still is an overwhelmingly white male workforce. And that's sort of these problems are interrelated. That's one of the reasons that these communities are underserved, is that there aren't enough people who have the language skills and cultural competencies working at these organizations to really effectively create strategies to make the programs work for them. And that's the other sort of side of the coin that we're trying to solve through one integrated program. So what we actually are trying to do is we're trying to work with these companies and bring them into these communities. And that is, making the front end not only work for the communities, but also like translating and supporting them so that the companies can effectively deliver services. It's a bit of a give and take. We are making it work and making, getting the customers there ready to engage with the programs and solving some barriers for them, but also solving some barriers for the companies and making the programs work on their end when they've really designed their programs for single-family homeowners. We're doing some support to make it all work for multi-unit buildings and multi-income buildings. And we're also exerting influence over these companies to make sure that their processes will work for those communities. So making sure they have multilingual staff, multilingual marketing materials, multilingual intake to the extent that we're not able to do the intake for them as well. And then we're training folks from those communities to do the work with us, and then we're helping them get jobs in the industry as well. So some of the challenges that we're addressing with these populations, as I mentioned before, renters, non-English speakers, and low to moderate income families, we've kind of categorized them into these 4 buckets of barriers. One is just awareness of the program. And it's not only awareness of like, okay, they maybe saw a billboard that says Mass Save, but knowing that they can participate in that and it's a program for them, even if they're renting their unit. And that's one barrier. So not only is the mass marketing potentially not reaching these audiences because they don't think it's for them or it's not done effectively or not done in their language, but there's lots of targeted marketing that's happening alongside of this by these for-profit companies that operate within the space. And since they, are operating to maximize their profit, they are targeting these, larger homes where they can get larger jobs and sell additional products. So they're maximizing for their lifetime customer value, which has them spending a lot of marketing dollars specifically not targeting these populations. So it stands to reason that fewer of those people are taking action when they're not the target audience for marketing. Trust is another big barrier. So unfortunately, there are lots of unscrupulous energy companies out there, third-party energy suppliers that have specifically targeted the communities that we work in, and there's a lot of people who have been harmed by those. So we really want to be delivering our message in a way that builds trust so that we can have people listen to the message without so much warranted skepticism that our industry has created. The other one is just access. As I mentioned, the program's really designed for the middle. They're designed for single-family homeowners to cruise through the programs. But when you have a building that has multiple units and mixed incomes and different languages, it becomes more difficult. So we're trying to make sure that works. And then there's the other barrier that we all face, but is prevalent in these communities as well, is just the time to devote the mind share to making this work for yourself. So we're trying to make it really easy for people to participate, not give them a lot of homework, when we're talking to them, give them immediate pathways to action. So what we actually do is we work with cities and towns to do community-based social marketing. We have partnerships with about 8 cities throughout the Commonwealth, and we're working in a co-branded way to invite people to participate, primarily in Mass Save, but also in some low-income community solar programs that I'll talk about. We hire from those communities multilingual staff with ties to those communities that can help us do this outreach. We've built a vendor network of companies that are willing to deliver service in an optimized way to these communities and also hire folks eventually who we are training. And then we do these co-branded marketing campaigns. We meet people where they are, whether that's at their grocery store, at a community event, at their house of worship, at City Hall, at the library, at their door. And we, in a place of trust, quickly deliver our message and give them immediate pathway to action. During COVID, this has looked a little bit different. We're doing more work on the phone, via email, via letters, to get people engaged, but sort of the similar co-branding has worked for us in those channels as well. And then we connect people to the programs and they save energy and money. So we got our start in 2018 working with the Codman Square Neighborhood Development Corporation. We're still working in Dorchester and expanding our work there. In 2019, we started working in Cambridge to specifically focus on kind of Cambridge's transient renter population. So we've got a lot of students or recent graduates who live in Cambridge, maybe just for a couple of years, and a lot of landlords who maybe don't care as much as they should about those buildings. So there's a lot of buildings, we found a lot of incandescent light bulbs in Cambridge over the last couple of years to swap out. And that's been an interesting program in Cambridge. In 2020, last year, we launched our first fully bilingual Spanish programs in the Merrimack Valley. In 2021, we're expanding our Spanish language programming and trying to replicate what we've done in Spanish and Portuguese, starting in Framingham and hopefully expanding that to other gateway cities where there are both Spanish and Portuguese speakers. And this is just our impact to date. We've engaged with about 5,000 residents across those cities, completed over 2,000 energy assessments, many/most for rental units. We've got a lot of weatherization jobs happening in those units. There's probably as many of these as we've done almost on the calendar for next year, that will be implemented in the coming year. And then we're saving people, all in all, folks have saved about $1 million a year on their energy bills, which is great. And we're really happy to have those benefits going into those communities who need those savings more than ever now. I'm going to go quickly through our workforce piece because it's not the focus of this session, but really what we're trying to do is sort of like bust the in-circle hiring practice that many, or penetrate that, where many people hire from their network. So you wind up getting a homogeneous workforce. So again, similarly, how we're connecting the energy programs to the residents that could use them, we're working to connect the companies who have jobs to those communities and also expose those jobs to the communities we're working in. Another thing that's a little bit different about us from a lot of workforce programs is that we are focused not on hands-on installation jobs, but more on customer-facing jobs, which really require less technical training, so a lower barrier to entry, and really put people in these like sales and customer service jobs that often have cleaner pathways to leadership. So we've been focused on that, makes us a little bit different as well. And yeah, we're primarily, our training model is to have people learn by doing out in the community, doing our outreach model, meeting customers, talking to them about the programs, learning all about the products and programs that make up our energy efficiency and renewable programs, sort of getting exposed to the types of jobs that there are in these communities, and really preparing them and then helping them find their next jobs after they've done their work with us. This is something we're still developing. It's been mostly happening on an ad hoc basis, but with some good, encouraging early results. This is our team really fast. We have had majority people of color, women, and the multilingual folks on the team. Almost everyone has been one of those three categories, me being one of the few exceptions, unfortunately. And we've got a great team, lots of great interns. We've hired most of our full-time staff from our interns. And we've been really proud of the amazing talent that has joined us over the course of our first couple of years in existence. This is where some of our past interns have wound up. So almost all of these folks, this was their very first job in the clean energy industry. And we're having a pretty good success rate of not only helping people find jobs, but helping people understand that there is a career in the clean energy industry. So some of them we've directly connected to these opportunities. We've hired a bunch of them, as you can see. But a lot of them have just taken their experience and on their own found their next job in the clean energy industry. So we're really proud of that. Love keeping in touch with all these folks and seeing them flourish throughout the industry. And now I want to talk specifically a little bit about how we're overcoming the barriers for those three specific populations, starting with renters. So as I mentioned, many renters pay into the Massive program monthly, but they don't know they can participate or they don't know how to participate. So we're working on that. There is this misalignment of incentives where the tenants are paying the bills and the landlords have to make the investments. So how to navigate through that. And then the companies operating in the program have really little incentive. I was talking about targeting before, to target renters, to pull them into the market, because it is more difficult because of the misalignment of incentives to turn that work into weatherization and deeper measures. So there's not a big financial incentive for those companies to actually reach out to renters. So we tackled this head on in Cambridge. We have leveraged a portion of the Massive program that was specifically for renters. And I'm sure most on this call are familiar with Massive, but one of the things that happens during energy assessment is you get a bunch of instant savings measures. So light bulbs, thermostats, efficient shower heads, and that does create immediate savings. We were finding the renters that participated in our program were saving about $200 a year on their energy bills from those instant savings measures. So we wanted to leverage that. We worked closely with one of our home performance contractors and created a hybrid position for someone who didn't quite have the experience to be a full energy advisor, but wanted to get into the space. So we worked with the Cambridge Adult Learning Center to recruit a multilingual resident and have them start doing these rental property assessments, where we're just basically delivering these ISMs to renters. We did most of the leads we generated were from canvassing. We knocked doors in Cambridge in the neighborhoods where there are a lot of renters. We had a letter from the town manager, and we just quickly built, credibility and invited people to schedule their renter appointment with Sean Oliphant. And we were able to serve about 200 renters in that model. And then COVID hit, and we had to kind of change our strategy. But with COVID, the challenges that came with COVID also came 100% weatherization incentives, which go a long way to wipe out the misalignment of incentives when landlords can make these investments for free. it's a lot easier to convince them that there is some ROI, even if they're not saving money on their energy bills. So we sort of shifted from a bottom-up approach to a top-down approach, and that has been even more successful, especially in terms of weatherization. We've gotten many more signed contracts working directly with landlords to weatherize their buildings, mostly reaching them through mail and then signing a lot of folks up. And the good news about that program is it's extended all the way through 2021. So any rental unit in a 1 to 4 family building that qualifies for Mass Save is eligible for 100% weatherization incentives for this entire year. So we're going to double down on that approach in all of our communities and working with continuing our bottom-up work, but really focusing this year on making sure that landlords know they can insulate their entire building at no cost for this entire year. On the Spanish speaker barriers, just again on the awareness, most of the outreach is done in English. And even if you get people excited, the full process isn't in Spanish. So there are some things that we can solve about that and some that we can't. Like we are not able to, the program, there's program-wide changes needed to present contracts in Spanish, for example, but we can make sure that energy assessments are delivered by a Spanish-speaking energy advisor and not through translation or some other way that's not going to be so optimal. So we've been working on that. And then we've found in these communities that they've had negative experiences kind of because of the previous bullet in which they've done a lot of outreach to their communities and had people participate, only to have like not a really streamlined and very difficult to manage process where it was hard to reach Spanish speakers to schedule things. They couldn't get questions answered. Their assessment was not in Spanish fully. So we're like sort of overcoming those barriers as well with our program. So what we're doing is like, we wanted to just kind of take a look at this program from the perspective of a Spanish speaker and try to figure out how we could make it work. And that obviously started by hiring a bilingual team, which we were proud to have amazing Spanish speakers on our team now. And we're continuing to grow that work. So that was what we could do internally to make sure that first touch was in Spanish, but we did have to work with the service delivery organizations to make sure that there were Spanish speakers on the other end to receive those leads. So we worked with HomeWorks, which is the largest home performance contractor on one end, and we're also working with the newest and smallest home performance contractor, Valley Home Insulation, which is based in Lawrence, Latino owned, and we're really trying to support their development. But on both ends of that spectrum, they were able to deliver energy assessments with a Spanish speaker, which was really beneficial to the program and allowed us to schedule those appointments with people who wanted that ability. And then there was the matter of just kind of learning from the community what works, or how do people find out information. So we've been on Spanish language radio. We're working with the faith-based community. There are these different communication platforms that are very prevalent in the city of Lawrence. So we're customizing the outreach to make sure that we maximize the number of people that we can reach at the top of the funnel as well. So on the last piece, on the low to moderate income piece, we really focused on this, not as much on the energy assessments, but on community solar. We wanted to find, there's already really good programming for low income folks through the CAP agencies throughout the state. And moderate income families do get 100% incentive now based on their income from Mass Save, but there's so much overlap with the multi-unit and renter buildings that it hasn't been a huge focus of ours to identify those folks. So it's something we're going to focus on more this year. So what we found working with low to moderate income families is that not only access, but desire to take on loans is an issue. So committing themselves to having to make a monthly payment, even if they are able to take that on, is not something everybody wants to do. We really realized doing this community solar outreach that I met a lot of people who are struggling in this COVID era, and a lot of people are able to need food or medicine. They're deferring payments on their utility bills. And some of the ways that this product works is you get your savings by paying your electric company less each month. So if you're not using that or using that as an access valve to pay other debts, it might not work for you. And then again, there's just this time issue. There's so many unscrupulous energy programs. Community solar, on the face of it, doesn't sound that different from what you're maybe getting pitched by somebody knocking on your door with a third-party energy supply contract, that it was really hard to cut through that noise. So what we're doing on the community solar side is we worked with two community solar companies, Solstice and Blue Wave, to help them capture data to understand the community needs. And we're still waiting for the results of those surveys to fully come out, but we were able to like sort of initially help capture data from the folks we've served through other programs. And then we did launch a partnership with SunWealth to work on low-income community solar product that we thought was suitable for the folks that we work with. Requires no credit enrollment, there's no cancellation fee, guarantees savings every month, and it's really no risk. And then we worked with our network of community partners in Boston to connect folks to the product. We were working with, one of the ways you qualify is by being in a census tract that is a income-based environmental justice community. So one of our neighborhood groups, the West on Washington Coalition in Dorchester, their entire footprint is one of these income-based environmental justice communities. So we went out and enrolled as many people as we could working with them. We worked with another great organization, Union Capital Boston, that has a bunch of folks who qualify for the program. And we were able to fill the array that we were working on, this solar carport out in Acton, but we did do a lot of learning. A lot of those learnings I mentioned earlier came from talking to a lot of customers and saying, oh yeah, you're really not gonna benefit from this if you don't pay your bill every month. And I met a lot of folks and was like, let's start by getting you on the reduced electric rate. I see that you probably qualify for that, but you're not on it right now. Or like, hey, you're paying 30% more for a third-party energy supply contract. Let's get you off that before we send you on to community solar. So it exposed a whole array of issues that were really interesting for me to learn about. And we've now optimized, we've created a webinar on bill literacy that we're presenting, and we're creating this, in the process of creating like a quick energy bill audit for folks so that we can quickly identify people that qualify for the discounted rate but aren't on it, and folks that are on a harmful third-party energy supply, and can help them exit that contract, and also while also identifying their eligibility for energy efficiency and renewable products. So that was great. We're trying to expand this program with SunWealth this year, and we are working with another developer to potentially get the program up and running, and similar program up and running in National Grid territory as well. So just going to wrap up here, reaching my 20th minute. Some critical key takeaways. One is that you really need to experience the program from the perspective of the folks that you're trying to help to understand the barriers that they have in order to come up with creative solutions. The local insight and partnerships is critical to success, both in understanding the barriers, but also to reaching the populations that you want to reach and helping them feel like they can trust the programs and access them. We really need a diverse multilingual staff at all levels. We're doing our part, but we really need to see folks at leadership levels and throughout these organizations. And that sort of ties into the last point, is like getting people these opportunities is in these companies is great, but we really do need additional support and mentoring to be successful in these. Often when they're the only one of who speaks Spanish or comes from one of these communities in that organization, it can be difficult to become part of the culture and succeed there as well. So mentoring and ongoing support is also critical. I don't know if we were doing our advocacy opportunities at the end, but I have mine here. Let me know, Sarah or Jenny, if that should happen now or later, but that is the crux of my presentation.
I think that maybe you could share now, and also we can share again at the end.
Okay, I'll go one more slide then. So this is just a note that like there's been a lot of great organization around the climate bill and like rallying around different legislation, but I just wanted to note that legislation is not always the end of this story. So we have been able to impact a decent amount or be part of folks who are really working with the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council, that is the group that's run out of the Department of Energy Resources that oversees the Mass Save program. And there's a lot of flexibility within the program to make changes. Like they decided this at the end of last year to make those rental units no cost for the entire year. And right now, they are coming up with the plan for how the program is going to operate from 2022 to 2025. And there's an opportunity to publicly comment on that. And there's a link. They've just closed their initial public comment portion, but they're going to release their plan, and then they'll be open to hear the public's comments on that as well. And I think now more than ever, this group and everyone is focused on equity. So there's like lots of work listening and work on making the program more equitable. And we just want to make sure that when that happens, it's written into the plan in a way that creates accountability about that. So I've got plenty of ideas. You can connect with me if you want to know what we're asking for. But I do want to have people make sure you can engage even after the bill is passed. There's a lot of work to be done to make sure that these programs work for everyone. And that was my advocacy piece.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Gabe. And if you could stop sharing your screen. Thank you. Excellent. That was fascinating. And so now I would like to transition to our next fascinating speaker, Keely Moore from Studio G Architects. Keely, I give you the microphone.
All right, and everyone can see my screen? Good to go. All right, so hello, my name is Keely, and as I was thinking about putting together this presentation, I realized there are so many different stories and perspectives around this topic. It's quite fascinating, and it was great to hear Gabe's view because I have a completely different view. So today I will talk about 3 different case studies, and so the first one is going to be a more aspirational design that we responded to an RFP for. The second one is going to be specifically on how we did tenant engagement with a housing authority client. And the third case study will be about lessons learned about the retrofit process and how funding plays a key role into how we make decisions. So a little bit about who we are, just in case you have never heard of us. We are Studio G Architects. We are proud to be a very diverse staff. We are located in Jamaica Plain in the Sam Adams Brewery Complex. And we do a lot of different things, and it's great because all the different projects that you work on really allow us to take lessons learned from one area and apply it to another area. So we do everything from new and retrofit housing, lots of schools, offices, lots of childcare and daycare, and also senior centers and institutions. So the first one is this aspirational project that a client was soliciting proposals for, that it would be in Jamaica Plain. He wanted to do all the things. So he wanted to do carbon neutral, passive house, affordable for artists and seniors, co-working space, a living machine, which is basically an ecological gray water, sewage water treatment system, interactive art, permaculture, public art. He wanted to do all the things. So it was very fun thinking about where we could go and like take it to the max. So so at the bottom right corner is the building as it exists today. It was built in the 1970s. And so our challenge was really to do all the things and see how we could make it work. And we had a great time basically trying to apply all the technologies that we were given, everything from regenerative design to carbon neutral materials. And here you can see in the site plan, the co-working space that he wanted to put on the front with the living machine to clean all the water, performative art spaces at the front, surrounded with built-in wetlands and orchards and the green roofs all around the site. And here's an example of some of the imagery that we gathered to show where all the thermal bridging is happening based on basically where all the yellow lighter color is, that's where heat is escaping. So it would need a deep energy retrofit to get to the passive house level, and solar panels would also help contribute to the energy savings. Sadly, we did not win this project, but it was a really good experience in trying to figure out how to make all these things work and make them affordable. So for the next project, we are in the process of working with this housing authority. And here's a site plan. It's 155 units in 25 buildings. And it's they're all 2-story townhome styles for the most part. There's a few 1-story levels, units. And here we mapped out the schedule, and we marked out each of the points where we have tenant engagement. And for this client in particular, it was very important to get tenant feedback. And that we found is not always the case, but this client was very keen on making sure that the residents know what's happening, getting their input and their feedback. So here's one example of what we were working on. Early in the process, we worked on qualitative surveys. So we distributed surveys to the residents and got their feedback on a number of different things, such as, you know, thermal comfort and how they were feeling in the winter and the summer. Like, could they smell the smells from their neighbors cooking the fish next door? And, you know, are there any limitations to the space layout? And we heard that the stairs were really awkward and people had a lot of hard times with them. You know, the sizes of the bedrooms weren't big enough, and the kitchen was lacking storage. And so we kind of used it as a way to confirm what we had seen on our walkthroughs, but also learn more about their day-to-day lives and how the units affected the way that they live. And so we built 2 scale models. You can see one here in the middle of the units, and we use those as kind of visual cues to talk about the space and how they wanted to see changes and what was the problem and how could we fix it. And we also brought with us several precedent images and inspirational imagery to see kind of more of what these people were hoping to see in their new units. So we did 2 of these kind of visioning workshops where we also brought the information from the surveys to talk more about, you know, the bigger picture issues. So that was very informative. And I like to call it reciprocal learning because we are learning from them and their daily experience, but we are also trying to share with them what we know and how what we do impacts their life. So for example, this issue of thermal bridging, to most people, it's probably unfamiliar, but to us, we think about it almost every day. These are infrared camera pictures taken here, and the yellow is where all the heat loss is. And so basically, like on the picture on the right, all that heat loss coming out the door, that is money out the door. And so we wanted to make it clear, like, this is not a good thing. We don't want to do this. And so using like simpler graphics on how to explain these concepts, we hope that it kind of makes more sense, like why it's really important that we get new doors and new windows in there, and that we insulate things like the foundation seen here, and the chimney was having a lot of issues. So that was kind of some ideas of how to communicate what we're doing. Another way we did that is communicating the solutions. So we see that there's a lot of problems with your walls, but we can solve it. And here's a little building section about what we would do to solve the problem. So we would remove the existing siding, repair and patch the sheathing, and put new insulation on and new air barriers, and then put new siding over that. And that would really take care of a lot of these issues. So this is another image that we use. Some of you may recognize this as the principles of passive house building. And it's really, we wanted to pull apart this is kind of the behind the scenes components that we as architects think about. And we wanted to pull it apart to make sure that the residents understand that all of these components really add up to a whole, and they really make a difference. So it's one way that just to explain the nuances on why we're doing things. So the third case study that I want to talk about is a senior housing project, and it's with an authority on the North Shore. There are 26 units, and they're all single story, also built in the 1950s. And we were asked to renovate the kitchens, bathrooms, and replace the doors and the windows. And the interesting thing is, and kind of this is where the lessons learned part comes in. So the Housing Authority got funding to have new roofs in 2012, and then they replaced the boilers in 2019. So the boilers provide hot water and hot water for the baseboard heating. We were involved in 2020. And the interesting thing is that the decision to replace the boilers, by the way, where is the insulation on those pipes? I would like to know. That decision directly relates to the kind of windows that we can put in, because with that system, there's no cooling component, so that the units still need AC units, which means still need double hung windows, which means windows that are not quite as good with air sealing as, say, a casement window would be. So we're already a little bit lower than what we could be. And the thing is that the way that the funding systems are set up to give the grants for these projects, it seems to sort of lack this holistic view and like a systems approach of thinking about the whole project over a timeline. And basically it kind of makes the client have to go piecemeal and like get as much as they can out of this tiny amount of money that they have, instead of thinking like, oh, let's not replace the boilers now. Let's wait till next year when we replace all the windows and we get more insulation. And then maybe we can think about how we can change the whole heating and cooling system to be more energy efficient. Because the thing is, it's kind of funny. All the decisions that we make are related. So as I was thinking about these new boilers, in fact, the boilers are sized off of the window sizes. So the whole system is sized off of the quality and number of the windows, plus how well the building is insulated, the thermal envelope, and how well the whole thing is air sealed, because the more leaks you have, the more heat loss and gain you're gonna get. So the fact that these boilers were kind of a separate system really kind of made us, wonder, well, what if we had been thinking about this all as one package? Then maybe we would have been able to think about it in terms of a new system, like a heat pump system with mini splits. You could have heating and cooling. That means you wouldn't need AC units, which means you could have better windows, and you could have a smaller system, because now that we're insulating everything, the system can be smaller. So the impact of that one decision really affected a lot of different things. And I think it's easy to forget how everything is all connected. Similarly, the roof was done in 2012, but now we are able to insulate the attic floor, which is good. But we have to put more holes in the roof because of the new bathrooms. And so it would have been a lot better to do it all at once so that we can get the proper air sealing and just kind of, it's more efficient just to do these things all at one time. And so I just thought this diagram was kind of fun, because it's really going through that all these decisions have an impact and they can't just be looked at as one thing. So it's just, I kind of wanted to leave everyone with the kind of the lesson learned that it's really, even though we have a really small scope of a project right now, such as replacing the boilers, it'd be really good to see it in a bigger, broader context, and how that one decision can affect a lot of other decisions. And it also affects the quality of the final product too, because we're not going to replace the boilers again because there's no money for that. So we have to work with what we have. But had there been a little bit more planning, we would have been able to be in a different situation. So my advocacy items are, so for example, sort of what we just talked about is there a way, some of you may be familiar with the Mass Saves has a great program to educate engineers and architects on passive house and, carbon reduction and really multifamily retrofits. They have like free education programs that I'm sure many of you have taken a part of. And I'm wondering if there is a similar program that could be developed for property managers and owners, because really they don't have time to be on the up and up about what is the latest and greatest technology. And it would be a great way just to increase their awareness so that they can be more aware of the great opportunities that they could take advantage of, instead of being kind of wary or cautious or not sure about what they should be doing. And then, so the second point is really, and I'm not a funding expert by any means, and I'm sure lots of you out there know way more than I do, but I just wonder, is there a way that we can encourage the funding systems to think more systematically about how we're doing things? Like, is there a way that we can have, can the funders like pool their money a little bit more instead of giving 50,000 this year, 50,000 next year? And I don't know, maybe there's solutions for this, but we would love to see it and have more people participate in thinking bigger term about the small and how the small scope projects fit into their system. And then third, related to the codes and all of the drama that happened lately about, not passing the climate bill, is there, as architects, we design to the code and above the code whenever possible. But we are often limited by the client and the municipality where the project is happening. And if that municipality has lower standards and the client doesn't have, has a very tight budget, there's no way to make sure that we get sustainability at the fullest potential that we can. So that's why it'd be great to have one easy code instead of like 50 different kinds of stretch codes and all these additions. And I mean, Boston and Cambridge and Somerville are doing great things, but we need everyone to do great things so that we can do, these great projects on a whole. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Keely. So I just want to reiterate to people on the call. So Gabe really was talking about working with communities from almost a community connector perspective and building these trusted networks. And Keely brought us in much deeper into specific projects and some of the challenges around lining up retrofits from a more systematic approach that maximizes the benefits associated with a variety of retrofit projects. So I am going to look at some of the other questions that were posted in the chat. Gabe has been responding to questions in the chat. So if you were part of the first or second person dropping questions for Gabe, he has replied. I've seen a couple of comments, Gabe and Keely, about the idea that renters are concerned that every time there's an improvement on the property, that there's a corresponding rent increase. And I think this comment has come about probably because of what Governor Baker pointed to in part of his justification for vetoing the climate bill last session. So I'm wondering, either Keely or Gabe, if what would your talking points be in response to that specific fear that renters might have in terms of an improvement at some point in time will result in an increase in rent?
Well, I'll just quickly say that right now, Mass Saves has a ton of programs that have 75% to 100% free upgrades. So that really, the landlord should take advantage of those and not pass it on to the renter, because I mean, I am also a renter and working on my landlord to do some of these things. And so I would hope that the landlord wouldn't need to, because the Mass Save coverage is quite a lot.
Right, yeah, I mean, that is definitely, at least for this year, all that work is free. So there's no need to raise rents. I don't think that this is a problem that doesn't, I think, have a simple solution. I think the more so on the municipal level, some of these cities like Cambridge are thinking about adding additional incentives and like really working with landlords. And then on the municipal level, you could attach some strings to additional incentives beyond the massive program that where landlords are agreeing to freeze rents for a certain number of years if they're receiving those additional incentives. I think it's difficult to do that with the massive program. And I think, I mean, honestly, I'm of two minds too. Like, it would actually be great if we could create some sort of green lease model where, you know, the tenants are saving on their utility bills and are giving a portion of those savings back to the landlord to fund the installation of these energy measures. Like, after everything stops being completely free, we need some mechanisms to alleviate this misalignment of incentives. So I know that those things exist on the commercial side, and that I just haven't seen it mass adoption for residential renters. But I think there's a way that we could be using that for good rather than evil, potentially in the future as well.
Yes, absolutely, Gabe. We have 2 minutes left, so I offer that we do one more question, and then we'll do closing remarks. So the last question is from Jane out west. In trying to work with housing authorities out in the Berkshires, to whom do we encourage them to hire to design the retrofit? And how do they make sure they're getting good energy efficiency advice? So in other words, this is about knowing who the trusted networks are. So Gabe or Keely, if either of you have insight into that, that'd be great.
I'll just throw out real quick, NESE, the Northeast Sustainable Energy Association. They are really great. They have a great network of builders and designers, and they have lots of free resources, and they're really awesome, super nice people. So check out their website, and I think they have a list of all of the people that are involved with them. So that would be a really good place to start.
And you can always engage with the utilities too. They sometimes have vendors that have been approved for various programs, and that might be a good place to start as well. Most of our work is on the small residential and non-low income, so I don't have as much to add there.
Okay, great. I am going to share my screen. And in closing, I just want to say thank you so much to Keely Moore and Gabe Shapiro. This has been a really rich and informative session. Let me quickly go to my remaining slides, go into present mode. And so we do want to end this call, this webinar, with a series of opportunities for people to learn more, to become more involved. Gabe opened up our session by talking about the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council. There are specific proposals that MCAN and others have been a part of. As Gabe mentioned, they have received all of their community-based recommendations for the moment and have gone back to the drawing board to put together the final proposal. And they will be releasing that again for public comment in the early spring in April. The Baker administration, your second opportunity is to read and become involved in commenting on the Clean Energy Climate Plan 2030, which outlines a variety of strategies. This is not regulation yet, these are ideas about how to meet our carbon reductions goals across different sectors. And there is a section in there on building codes. And if you want to learn more about that, feel free to contact me. Two other items for you to ponder getting involved with. Again, with the climate bill on Governor Baker's desk, advocating for a net zero building code in this refiled bill. And you can certainly borrow scripts that MCAN has developed precisely for this opportunity. Also, I really encourage you, if you get involved in advocating for the net zero building stretch code, that you post on social media, Twitter. And the more people on Twitter, the more pressure on the governor's office. Lastly, we do have an upcoming event, Networking for Change. And this builds off of the idea that we are really trying to cultivate a cross-sector network of advocates pushing for net zero stretch codes, pushing for affordable housing is in fact a climate solution. And this is our next event on February 2nd. And we will talk through some of the CECP 2030 document and opportunities for engaging in that comment period, which CECP comment period closes middle to end of February. With that, I will stop sharing my screen. We will be following up with everybody on this call with the video link, with a consolidated slide deck. We will save the chat because Gabe has been posting responses in it, and other folks have left commentary as well. So with that, Jenny, do you have any other closing remarks you'd like to make?
No, I posted the link also for the networking session into the chat for everyone to see. And yes, we will consolidate all the questions and answers, and hope to connect with you all again next week as well. And thank you, MCAN, and thank you to our speakers, and thank you to everyone for joining us today.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody. Take good care. Enjoy your Monday. And thank you for being here.